All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. With the 2023 NFL Draft in the books, we're just 356 days away from the 2024 version of this event. Now, what do we know so far? The Arizona Cardinals, and I talked about this earlier this week, they're definitely going to be a team to keep an eye on as they have six picks in the first three rounds of the draft, which includes a pair of first rounders after they moved out of the third slot last week to allow the Houston Texans to move up from number 12 in order to take Will Anderson Jr. Like I talked about it earlier this week, and I'll say it again, this could be a chance for the Cardinals to build around quarterback Kyler Murray, or it could be, a scenario where they decide to just rebuild and blow the whole thing up and go in another direction, depending on where these picks are and depending on how their season plays out. They could possibly move on from Kyler Murray. Don't I'm not saying it's a guarantee, but I'm not saying that it isn't either. You look at the Chicago Bears, they're going to have an additional first round pick after they finished the season with the worst record in the NFL. They had the number one overall pick. They moved out of that spot and allowing the Carolina Panthers to come up from 9-1 in order to take quarterback Bryce Young. And of course, in the course of that, they picked up an additional first rounder for 2024. Now, the Texans did give up their first rounder to the Arizona Cardinals, but they're still in possession of a first rounder due to the Deshaun Watson trade, as they still have another first rounder coming their way via the Cleveland Browns. Also going to see, some teams to keep an eye on in the other early rounds. The New Orleans Saints, this year, their first round pick went to the Philadelphia Eagles. This time around for next year, it's going to be their second round pick. New Orleans will get a second round pick though, because they're going to get one courtesy of the Denver Broncos. And a lot of this goes back to the Sean Payton trade. The Detroit Lions, they pick up Minnesota's third round pick that goes back to the trade for tight end TJ Hawkinson. Also, like I talked about with Houston, they're sending their third round pick to Arizona. Denver sending their third to Seattle, and then Denver is getting one from New Orleans. So it's going to be a lot of moving around with teams having additional picks early on in next year's draft. And that's just right now. A lot is going to change between now and then. But still, you could have a couple of teams that are really dictating things early on, led by the Cardinals. To me, as of right now, I do feel at least three quarterbacks are going to go next year in the first round of the draft. I'm going to start with USC quarterback Caleb Williams, of course, the reigning Heisman Trophy winner. Had he have been eligible for the draft this year, he would have been the first overall pick. That's a no-brainer. Going back to school, obviously, for his junior season, is going to see first and foremost if he can stay injury-free, because that people are going to be gunning for him. And at the same time, will his play in 2023 hinder his draft stock in 2024? I doubt it unless he plays real bad, which I doubt, or he has a bad injury, but we got to wait and see. North Carolina quarterback Drake May, I do believe, as of right now, is going to be a first rounder as well. And then some other quarterbacks to keep an eye on. Shador Sanders out of Colorado. I know he played last year at Jackson State for his dad, went to Boulder with his dad, Dion, as well. And it's a scenario, if he does have a solid season and lights up the Pac 12 this year, you're going to hear his name possibly being called early next year as well. Bo Nix out of Oregon. And, Bo Nix kind of surprised some people as far as coming back to school for his senior season. But you look at what Dan Lanning has done with that offense out there in Eugene. And I think Bo Nix really showed that he is a solid passer of the quarterback in that offense. And Oregon is expected to be one of the top teams in the Pac 12 this coming season. And with that said, a lot of eyes are going to be on Bo Nix. Now, staying in the Pac 12, Michael Penix Jr., like Bo Nix, he transferred to the Pac 12. He came from Indiana, in the Big Ten. Now, he's going into his second year at Washington, had a phenomenal year in his first season at UW. Going to definitely look to build off of that. And like Oregon and USC, I do expect Washington to be in the mix to be one of the top teams in the Pac 12. And with that said, there's going to be more eyes and more focus on the play of Penix. Quinn Ewers at Texas, he had some injuries last year. And of course, heading into this year, a lot of the talk at Texas at quarterback is around Arch Manning. But if Quinn Ewers is able to hold off Arch Manning and be the starting quarterback for Texas and have himself a big season, it's not out of the realm of possibilities to see or hear his name called in round number one at next year's draft. Some other players to keep an eye on: the Ohio State wide receivers, and I'm talking about Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka. Marvin Harrison, like Caleb Williams, is a guy that if he came out of school this year, or let me rephrase that, if he had been eligible to come out of school this year, he would have been a top five pick. You look at the talent that is there for Marvin Harrison Jr. You think about the lineage in recent years of Ohio State wide receivers coming out in the first round. Marvin Harrison Jr. arguably could be the best. He learned from one of the better route runners of all time in the NFL, his dad, Marvin Harrison Sr. Marvin Harrison Jr. is a tremendous route runner. He also has a great pair of hands, and there's not a lot that this young man cannot do on the gridiron. And I'll tell you like this: he is staring down a barrel of being a top five pick next year, depending on how things break. And then, of course, Emeka Egbuka. You think about it: Marvin Harrison Jr., Jackson Smith and Jinga, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, just to name a few as far as the wide receivers that have been coming out of Ohio State as of late. Emeka Egbuka at times has gotten lost in the wash, but this kid can play, and he definitely has all of the tools to be a first round pick in next year's draft. Also, looking at the tight end position, a lot of people are going to be focused on Brock Bowers out of Georgia. Again, it's the kind of familiar phrase that you're hearing me talk about on this podcast. If this guy had come out this year, and if Brock Bowers had come out this year, he would have definitely been a first rounder. A lot of people thought Michael Meyer out of Notre Dame was going to be a first rounder. He slipped. We did see Dalton Kincaid out of Utah be a first round tight end last week. And I guarantee you, Brock Bowers has all of those tools. Tremendous receiver of the football, tremendous pass catcher, big body, being able to shed blockers. Linebackers have a very difficult time staying with him. And he's a guy, as far as it goes, in regards to running pass routes, he's a guy that a safety has to constantly stay with him, which is definitely going to open up things in an offense. On the defensive side of the ball, looking at a pair of Alabama defenders, you're talking about Kool-Aid McKinstry and Dallas Turner. Of course, Alabama's defense under head coach Nick Saban is always a quality unit. They're always sending quality defenders to the NFL. This time around, it was Will Anderson Jr. You think about Dallas Turner playing alongside Will Anderson Jr. in that linebacking core. The cupboard is never bare under Nick Saban at Tuscaloosa, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And I think if Dallas Turner has himself a big year here in 2023, he could be a top pick, first rounder at least, in next year's draft. And then Kool-Aid McKinstry, a solid corner, but then also he's good on special teams as far as returning punts. That dual threat right there, as well as his ability as an athlete, should lead to him hearing his name early on in next year's draft. I think it's going to be a race to the bottom to get the likes of Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm not going to go as far as to saying there's an NFL team or teams that are going to be out there tanking this season. I highly doubt that. But nonetheless, once we get to late November, early December, and you kind of get a feel as far as what teams are not only out of the playoff picture in the National Football League, but what teams are staring down a barrel of being a top five team in regards to picking early in the draft next year, you're going to hear the murmurs as far as Caleb Williams. You're going to hear the murmurs as far as Marvin Harrison Jr., especially if a team already has themselves a quarterback in place. But at the end of the day, that's just the nature of the beast. When fans and the media in local regions and nationally for that part see that a team is out of it, you know what? At that point, it's just time to start looking ahead and seeing what the potential prospects can be for your team improving on a Sunday basis. But at the end of the day, it's still too early to think about who's going to be picking in the top five. We haven't even seen the NFL's schedule released, more or less have training camp, but we do know that these are some of the players that are more than likely to hear their names called very early on at the draft proceedings next year in Motown. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I'm signing off. And I'm saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.